every spring come and cheer our spirits by thine advent here. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
Hello, thank you for making time to spend with me today. You may recall in April we started this project of building a vegetable garden bed on the side of this hill. It's quite a steep slope, so we created an entire wall out of steel and chicken wire, stones and special fabric that lets the water drain. And then, with the help of our neighbour, the sheep farmer, who brought us hay and sheep manure, we started layering the bed, which was a lot of work because the tractor could only arrive up to the olive tree, so it had to be done one wonky wheelbarrow at a time. This episode, you can see the finished result. We already have one terraced garden bed up by the cottage and herbs planted close to where we eat for adding a last-minute handful of thyme or parsley to a dish. However, we've had some much-needed rain and the herbs have gone wild. Have you ever seen parsley with stalks the width of celery? While Guido worked on finishing the last layers of brick for the wall, I weeded all the sprouts that have popped up in between the bricks on the terrace. I always think it's such an act of determination when you see weeds come up through brick. These literally came up in the last 2 days that we were back in Florence. Can you imagine if we left this place for a month? It would become a jungle. I also pruned the herb garden. I used the feathery fronds of all this fennel for homemade herbal tea, and with all this parsley, I'm going to make a big batch of salsa verde. In Italy, salsa verde is traditionally served on boiled meat, but you can also find it in Florence or all of Tuscany on their famous panini with lampredotto, which is cow stomach. But as you may know, Italians waste no part of the animal, and lampredotto with a generous dollop of salsa verde on a chewy Tuscan panino is what most tradesmen will eat if they stop for lunch at a food truck on the side of the road. But in Florence, I've also seen corporate men and women in impeccable Italian suits biting into this succulent sandwich. They also serve a version with porchetta if lampredotto is too much for you. A panino with lampredotto and salsa verde is to Florence what the hot dog is to New York. Anyway, the salsa verde is traditionally made with parsley, garlic, capers, anchovies, olive oil, bread soaked in white wine vinegar, boiled egg yolks, and sometimes a little chili.
O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
While I washed and chopped the mountains of parsley, Egisto, the caretaker on the farm who was actually born in this cottage by the vegetable garden, came to help Guido layer on more manure and soil. If you haven't heard Egisto's story, you might want to go back and watch episode 3. I'll put a card link on the screen. You can hear what life was like here when the Nazi soldiers came and shot partisans on this very hill. As Egisto shoveled, he spoke to me about his fond memories of his mother's salsa verde. As you will have seen from the intro, we now have horses. Don't they look so happy and mythical in amongst the olive trees and all the plants? A neighbour asked if he could keep them here, and as we have so much trouble with how fast the weeds and plants and grass grow on this side of the hill, and it's so steep that one can't pass with a lawnmower or a ride-on mower, so it's the perfect arrangement. We get majestic lawnmowers, and they get an entire hillside of over half a hectare or 6,000 square meters, rich with food. We built a fence from chestnut logs along the driveway, but it's so expensive to build the entire fence out of timber, so we had to switch to these steel posts for the majority of it. We thought in the future we might plant some vines or mulberry bushes that can hide the steel. The sheep farmer had to deliver more manure. We're trying to make this garden bed as rich and deep as possible because the earth on this hill is full of stones and quite hard. The grass around the cottage has grown out of control. Egisto bought me a scythe from the barn that they have been using here to cut grass and wheat and tall-growing vegetables like radicchio for hundreds of years. It was actually often the women who were out using a scythe like this because it's light and one can get into areas like this on a slope. I just love thinking about the women who might have held this scythe 100 years before me and maybe even cut wheat in the fields below. All those green hills you see surrounding the farm are cultivated with crops like wheat and hay for animals. There's no noise pollution or smell of fuel, just the swish of my blade pulling through the grass.
La tengono poca.
Sì, però sono gentili là.
Sì,
Cioè, mi piace.
sono così alla buona. Insomma,
Sì.
In amongst it all, I found some wild radicchio, which I will gladly cook up for dinner with some lemon and olive oil. Many of you asked me for my recipe for the lightest but loveliest carrot and ricotta soup, so I made it again, this time measuring out my ingredients. I'll put the recipe on my site, califlavel.com. I begin by roughly chopping carrots. I grind some cumin seeds and some coriander seeds with my mortar and pestle, and then fry off a red onion with the spices in a little olive oil. I find frying the spices first gives so much more depth to the soup rather than just adding them in when the liquid is in the pot. I like to pack this soup with nutrition and flavour, so I use fresh ginger, grated in, and then I add water and stock cubes. I like to dissolve the cubes in a ladle so I can see that they've definitely completely dissolved. Then I add the carrots and cook this for not very long, just until they are soft. Now this could work for a vegetarian, but Guido loves the smokiness of pancetta, so I fry up some pancetta in another small pan. I do this because if I had added it to the wet onions, it wouldn't crisp up as nicely, and these crisp golden edges help develop a lot of the flavour. The carrots seem just cooked, so now I blend in 2 batches so the blender doesn't overheat or get too full. I add the ricotta and some fresh parsley. The ricotta is going to give the soup a wonderful creaminess without making it as heavy as it would be if we used cream or milk. But the reason I love it is because of the texture it creates. The soup becomes thicker but also light and airy. Then I pour both batches back into a pot to heat and season. I add a generous grind of black pepper. I don't add salt until this point because I want to wait to see how salty the stock is, the pancetta, how the sweetness of the carrots might balance things. And although I tend to stay away from bread, sometimes I fry a little stale bread cubes in some olive oil just to create a little crunch on top and entice Guido, because although this soup is incredibly filling, sometimes one, and by one I mean carnivores or carb fanatics, can assume that it's going to be too light, so the croutons allay their fears. Then I just top it with some fresh parsley and a drizzle of olive oil. I'm a very fast cook. Guido and my sister always joke about how in the time it takes them to shower, I can put together a 3-course meal. But I have to say, this really is a very fast recipe, so it's great for weeknights or a lazy weekend lunch. Look at our roses. They've bloomed so much since we've been away. Everything is so happy after the rain.
Nature time. Look, this year we haven't got a very good crop because we didn't plow the land, the soil, we didn't give much. So this is what it came out from just letting them be. And as you can see, there's not many artichokes. Watch. Ooh, these are nice. These are beautiful. Watch it. Entry. Ooh, there's another one there.
And what do you plan to do with these carciofi?
I'll give some to my father, that he loves them, and he always used to have these artichokes brought up from the countryside, and I think my mother will produce a sauce for the pasta, or they will just be cooked as a side dish, as a vegetable.
Meanwhile, back to our mountain of parsley. After washing and drying and chopping, I decided to freeze some of it in ice cube trays with a little olive oil so I can throw the cubes into a stew or pasta or a soup. If you want to freeze parsley on its own, you have to be sure it's completely dry. For the salsa verde, I chop aglio, prezzemolo, acciughe, olio, sale, pepe, capperi, le uova sode, pane soaked in aceto di vino bianco, and peperoncino. Scorza di limone is not traditional, but I'm adding it just to lift the salsa a little. You could blend all of this, and probably it would have saved me a lot of time chopping, but I wanted to make it as Agisto's mother would have made it. Also, Guido says he prefers the more rustic version, which is thick and textured and chopped by hand. Unfortunately, salsa verde isn't like pesto that can last for a while, so it has to be eaten within a few days. It's best to leave it for a couple of hours at room temperature so all the flavors can deepen and soak into each other. On this day, I roasted a chicken to serve Guido my salsa verde, a hearty lunch to fuel us up for the final hours of work on our garden bed.
Bravissima. Meno male si è avuto l'invasione di prezzemolo. Guarda qua. Wow. Super tasty.
Sì?
Sì, buonissimo.
He loved it so much he went a little overboard on the salsa, but I was very happy that he liked it. And then we went off to the nursery to finally buy vegetable saplings, as our orto, our vegetable garden, was almost finished. And the owner is so lovely, she gave me some free eggs from their chickens.
Tutto c'è tutto il concime da tutte le parti. Lì proprio manca la terra. Se avanza lì, allora si può mettere anche lì. Se no manca lì all'inizio. Ce ne vuole tanta perché si basta.
Honestly, this project was so much back-breaking work, but I think now we've made use of the sunniest and most protected corner of the property, I feel like a vegetable garden near the table where you eat will never be neglected, because it will be such a pleasure to come and water here and keep an eye out for slugs or animals that may wander up to munch on our vegetables.
Who do you want in the front row?
No, hai ragione, ci vuole un altro sacco. Allora, queste sono peperoni, capsicums, celery, cucumbers, salad, a type of tomatoes. These are tomatoes that will crawl down. Zucchini. I think these are zucchini. Eccole qua, su zucchine sì.
Sì.
Vedi, c'hanno. Guarda, ha fatto la micro zucchina.
Sì, sì.
Vai.
E quindi vicino al bordo?
Che abbia un po' di spazio per fare le radici.
Sì. Però l'idea è che...
Deve andare fuori.
Sì.
Questo lo posso mettere un po' più qua.
Quanto spazio tra i cetrioli?
C'è scritto
40.
sulla scatola. Ci dovrebbe essere scritto.
Distanza... Ah, sì. 100 per 50?
Vogliono 1 metro.
It's exciting, no? We finally finished it.
Yeah. No, scusa, sto digerendo quella roba.
Sì.
Sto facendo dei rutti all'aglio.
Sorry.
Che storia, era buonissimo, però.
Mi sono alzata alle 4, poi ho ascoltato un podcast alle 4 fino alle 8. Ci siamo quasi, amore. Almost at the end.
And so, finally, it's finished. So now, all we have to do is wait for our produce to grow, which, with this climate in Tuscany, shouldn't be very long at all. Thank you to my patrons. Thank you for carving out some time in your weekend to share these moments with me. I'll see you next time. Alla prossima.
Come thou days bring calm and cheer our spirits by